The chair was carved from a single block of star whale ivory small enough to fit a human child, and polished until it gleamed like a fossilized tooth. The Theron artisan who crafted it had etched the armrests with scenes of reptilian triumph, scales crushing planets, claws rending starships, and laughed as he worked. To his kind, it was a joke, a toy. To humanity, it would become a gauntlet. The Theron Empire had not always despised humans. Once they merely pitied them, while lizards the size of freight trains bench-pressed asteroids to pass the time. Humans tinkered with their fragile machines, their spindly limbs and soft flesh begging the galaxy's question, why do they even try? The answer arrived quietly, wrapped in silence and sweat. Humans did not erupt into glory. They eroded resistance grain by grain. They built bridges where the Theron smashed mountains, nursed embers where others demanded fire. But the galaxy only sees what it wants to see. When the Theron Emperor first glimpsed a human diplomat, pale, unarmed, dwarfed by his own ceremonial armor, he dismissed them as ants with delusions of grandeur. The chair was meant to codify that contempt, to make their inferiority a monument. Yet as the artisan sanded its edges, he paused. The ivory, ancient and cold, seemed to hum beneath his claws. Star whales were extinct, their skeletons littering dead systems, but their bones remembered even giants could be outlasted. The first human envoy arrived the next cycle. She did not flinch at the chair. She did not speak. She simply stood beside it, her shadow stretching long and thin under the arena's harsh lights, and waited. The Theron mistook her stillness for surrender. They did not notice the calluses on her hands. Chapter 1. The airlock hissed open, and Captain Dex Mercer stepped into the belly of the Theron warship, his boots clanking against the obsidian floor. The armor he wore, rusted powerlifting plates fused with diplomat's insignia, groaned like an old beast. It had been years since he'd hoisted competitive iron, but he still carried the weight, not of metals, but of ghosts. The air stank of burnt sulfur and alien musk, a cocktail that made his nostrils flare. Somewhere in the ship's labyrinthine halls, a deep guttural roar reverberated, the sound of Theron warriors priming for spectacle. He remembered the first time he'd seen them, 7 feet tall, scales like polished onyx, tails lashing like metronomes, counting down to violence. They'd stormed the Federation outpost on Vega Night, not with plasma cannons, but with bare claws, ripping through bulkheads as if they were paper. Mercer had been lifting in the station gym when the alarms blared. By the time he'd re-racked the weights, half his crew were already pulp. Now here he was, walking into their den as an ambassador. Irony's a bitch with claws, he thought. The corridor opened into a vaulted chamber, its ceiling lost in shadows. Theron delegates loomed at a crescent table, their slit-pupilled eyes tracking him. Mercer's gaze fell to the center of the room. There, bathed in a shaft of sickly green light, sat a chair. It was a child's seat. No, smaller. A Theron toddler's, carved with crude serrations, its legs stubby and splayed. The message was clear: this is what we think of your species. Sit, little human. Know your place. A murmur rippled through the delegates, a sound like gravel sliding down a chute. Mercer's jaw tightened. His armor, usually a second skin, felt like a cage. He could almost hear his old coach snarling, "You wanna be a monument? Then act like one." He didn't sit. Instead, he planted himself beside the chair, his armored shoulders squared. The Theron Emperor, Krasthur, uncoiled from his throne. His scales gleamed like oil, and when he spoke, his voice was a tectonic rumble. No, sit. Mercer met his gaze. Human spines rust if they bend too much. Krasthur's tongue flicked, tasting the air. Pity. That seat took weeks to carve. Laughter rolled through the chamber, a landslide of malice. A flashback struck Mercer like a sucker punch. The Vega Nice gym, the crackle of flames, Corporal Lee's voice over the comms, "Cap, they're in the vents," and his own snarled reply, "Hold, I'm re-racking." By the time he'd charged out, Lee's exosuit was a crumpled chrysalis, her blood pooling beneath the 500 kilograms deadlift platform. He'd carried that guilt like a barbell ever since. Weakness, Krasthur hissed, snapping Mercer back. The Emperor gestured to a hologram, shimmering above the table, a human colony, its spindly towers dwarfed by Theron warships. Your Federation begs for our Hyperion, yet you stand there clanking like a tin soldier. Where is your leverage? Mercer's hand drifted to the scar beneath his left pauldron, a relic from Vega Nights. Strength's not always in the grip, he said quietly. Sometimes it's in the grind. The chamber fell silent. Later, aboard the Federation frigate Resolute, Mercer stood in the observation deck, staring at the Theron warship dwindling in the void. The tiny chair burned in his mind. He'd seen the way the lower caste Theron had lingered after the meeting, their eyes darting to his armor, not with mockery, but curiosity. They're not all Krasthur, he realized. The door hissed open. Lieutenant Mara Voss stepped in, her boots silent on the steel mesh. She smelled like gun oil and jasmine, a contradiction that always unnerved him. You looked like a statue in there, she said, leaning against the viewport. Her voice was cool, but her knuckles whitened where she gripped the rail. Statues don't bleed, he replied. A pause. The stars outside painted her face in frost. This isn't a weight room, Dex. You can't ego lift your way through diplomacy. He turned. Her eyes were hard, but the scar on her temple, a souvenir from Vega Nights, twitched faintly. She'd been there. She'd seen him fumble the bar. What's your play? She pressed. He nodded to the hollow screen flickering on the wall. Theron media feeds, replaying the chair incident on loop. They think we're brittle. Time to show them how we bend. The gym rose on the edge of the Theron border, a jagged asteroid retrofitted with grav plates and steel. Mercer had insisted on raw materials, no polished alloys, no sterile lighting. Let the Theron see the sweat, the rust, the calloused hands hauling cables. Human engineers swarmed the site, their exosuits whining under loads of iron plates. Mara found him in the squat rack, his armor discarded for a frayed tank top. The bar bowed under 800 kilos, his veins mapping the strain. You're really doing it, she said. The challenge. He re-racked the weight, the crash echoing through the cavernous space. Krasthur's got the muscles, but we've got the nerve. She tossed him a protein bar, and when he crushes you, then you get to say I told you so. For the first time in years, her lips quirked. I'll bring confetti. As she left, Mercer gripped the bar again. The ghosts were quieter here, drowned out by the clang of iron. He thought of Krasthur's sneer, the way the lower caste lizards had lingered. Pride's their weakness, he mused. And we've got a whole gym full of crowbars. That night, he transmitted the challenge, a single set of squats, him versus the Emperor. The barbell, a black hole generator, its hologram flickering with faux singularity. The Theron response was immediate. You will die trembling, Krasthur broadcasted, flanked by his brood. Mercer didn't smile, he just loaded another plate. Somewhere in the dark, a revolution was warming up. Chapter 2. The gym's fluorescent lights buzzed like trapped wasps, their glare slicing through the haze of chalk dust and sweat. Captain Dex Mercer stood at the edge of the platform, his calloused hands wrapped around the knurled steel of the bar. 800 kilograms hovered above him, suspended on magnetic rails, a mockery of gravity, a simulation of the impossible. His reflection warped in the plate's polished surface, a fractured man staring back. This isn't about lifting, he told himself. It's about leverage. He bent his knees, the old ache in his hips flaring. The bar settled against his trapezius, the cold bite of metal a familiar anchor. His breath fogged the air, each exhale a silent countdown. The first rep was always the hardest, the body protesting its own ambition. He drove upward, tendons screaming, and for a moment he wasn't in the gym. He was back on Vega Ike, the station's alarms wailing, the stench of burning insulation clogging his throat. Corporal Liz's voice crackled in his memory. They're in the vents, Cap. Where the hell are you? The bar clanged into the rack. Mercer staggered back, sweat stinging his eyes. Around him, engineers in grease-streaked exosuits welded steel beams into place, sparks raining down like dying stars. The gym was growing, evolving, its ribs of iron and titanium curving toward the cavernous ceiling, a monument to persistence, a middle finger to the Theron's sneering holograms. Mara found him later in the locker room, his forearms braced against a rusted sink. The mirror showed a man eroded by guilt, his stubble flecked with gray. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, her silhouette sharp under the flickering bulb. "You're pushing too hard," she said. No warmth, no accusation, a statement of fact. He turned, water dripping from his jaw. "You here to bench me, Lieutenant?" Her eyes narrowed, the scar on her temple, a jagged line from Vega Inc.'s collapse, twitched. "You're not 20 anymore. Your ego's writing checks your tendons can't cash." He almost smiled. She'd always known where to dig the knife. "It's not about the weight," he said, toweling off. "It's about the show." She tossed him a data chip. "Jax finished the schematics. Says it's a masterpiece of petty engineering." The chip glinted in his palm. A hologram, not just any illusion. A black hole generator, its event horizon shimmering with calculated menace. The Theron would see crushing gravity. Mercer would feel only the emitter's hollow shell, a psychological sledgehammer. "Will it hold?" he asked. Under scrutiny. "Doubtful, but lizards don't stare too long at their own victories." She paused. "You're betting everything on their arrogance." "Arrogance is just fear in armor." She left without another word, her footsteps swallowed by the gym's echoing clatter. Mercer dressed slowly, the fabric of his shirt clinging to fresh welts on his shoulders. Outside, the asteroid's surface stretched barren and pockmarked, the stars a silent audience. Somewhere in that ink-black void, Krasler was preparing too, ripping engines from battleships, feeding on the adoration of his brood. But Mercer's war wasn't fought with muscles, it was in the margins, the way a lower caste Theron had lingered after the summit, claws brushing the Federation gym's doorframe, the hesitation in their growls when human engineers handed them tools. They're curious, he realized, and curiosity is the first crack in dogma. The Resolute's lab hummed with tension, its air thick with ozone and ambition. Jax the engineer, sprawled across a workstation, her boots propped on a holographic console, her fingers danced over a floating keyboard, splicing code into the emitter's core. Mercer watched as she twisted a virtual black hole into existence, its accretion disk spinning lazily above them. "Beautiful, right?" Jax smirked, her voice muffled by the toothpick clenched in her teeth. "A singular lie." Mercer reached out, the hologram rippling through his fingers. "Will Krasler believe it?" "Belief's your department, Cap. I just make pretty lies." She flicked the simulation into oblivion. "But here's the kicker. The emitter's got a heartbeat, a thrum even lizards can feel. They'll think it's real because they'll feel it's real." He nodded. The Theron's strength was sensory, rooted in the vibrations of dominance. A subsonic pulse would gnaw at their instincts, make Krasler's tail twitch with doubt. Doubt is lighter than steel, Mercer thought, but it bends knees faster. Night cycles on the asteroid were artificial, a dimming of lights to mimic Earth's rhythms. Mercer prowled the gym's perimeter, his boots crunching over spilled chalk. The squat rack loomed ahead, a monolith of solitude. He loaded the bar, 900 kilos now, a number that would have made his younger self giddy, and slid beneath it. The first rep was agony, the second, transcendence. By the third, his vision blurred, the gym dissolving into fragments of memory. Mara pinning him to the Vega Ein medbay cot, her fist twisted in his shirt. You fucking waited to rack the weights while Lee bled out." He hadn't denied it. What was there to say? That the gym was his temple, the iron his liturgy, that he'd needed the ritual to face the carnage. The bar slipped. Pain exploded in his lower back as he collapsed, the plates shrieking against the safeties. He lay there, breathless, the ceiling spinning. Above him, a flickering hoload, played on loop. Krasler hoisting a frigate's engine, the Theron media crowning him God made flesh. Mercer laughed, the sound raw and broken. Gods don't sweat, he thought. They don't grind. He found Mara on the observation deck, her face bathed in the glow of the Theron border outpost. The station's lights pulsed like a slow heartbeat, a taunt in the dark. "You're going to die," she said, not turning. "Maybe. And if you do, what's the point?" He joined her at the viewport, their shoulders inches apart. The scent of jasmine cut through the sterile air. "The point is they'll see it. The grunt work, the calluses, us choosing to keep going." She finally looked at him. "You think that matters to them. It matters to us." A beat. The stars wheeled silently. Then her hand brushed his. A ghost of contact, gone before he could flinch. "You're still a bastard," she muttered. "But I'm your bastard." She didn't smile, but her eyes softened, just for a heartbeat. The final test came at 0300. The gym was empty, the engineers asleep. Mercer stood before the hologram emitter, its matte black shell, innocuous as a coffin. Jax had embedded it in a standard barbell, the illusion dormant. "Engage," he whispered. The black hole bloomed, a perfect void, light bending around its edges. The bar in his hands remained light, but the emitter's subsonic thrum vibrated through his bones, a primal dirge. Above him, the air warped, the floor creaking under imagined mass. "This is it," he thought. A lie wrapped in truth. He lifted. The hologram held. In the quiet hour before dawn, Mercer sat in the gym's makeshift sauna, steam curling around him like phantom hands. His muscles hummed with fatigue, his mind with resolve. Krasner would bring spectacle, the roar of the crowd, the raw might of empire. But Mercer would bring the grind, the unglamorous, unending grind that turned coal to diamond. He slid a hand into his locker, fingers brushing the data chip Jax had given him. Beneath it lay a faded photo. Lee, Mara, himself, grinning after a pre-mission lift. Lee's arm was slung over his shoulders, her grin bright with invincibility. "We bend," he thought, "but we don't break." Somewhere beyond the asteroid, the Theron Empire slept, secure in its supremacy. Mercer loaded the bar one last time. Chapter 3. The Theron Colosseum rose from the ashen plains of Zeta Prime, like the ribcage of a dead god, its arches clawing at a sulfur-yellow sky. Captain Dex Mercer stepped from the dropship, his boots sinking into dust that reeked of dried blood and burnt fuel. The crowd's roar hit him first, a wall of sound that vibrated in his molars, primal and hungry. Thousands of scaled faces leered from the stands, their slit-pupilled eyes reflecting the arena's pitiless floodlights. At the center of the sand-strewn floor stood Krasner, the Emperor's tail lashing a trench into the earth, his claws curled around the engine block of a dismantled starship. Mercer's armor felt heavier here, as if the planet itself resented his presence. He adjusted the straps of the hologram emitter disguised as a barbell, its matte black surface drinking in the light. The black hole generator's illusion was dormant, but the emitter's subsonic pulse thrummed against his sternum, a steady, ominous heartbeat. Just another lift, he told himself, but the rack's a galaxy wide. A Theron herald bellowed, the words translated through Mercer's earpiece as static-edged venom. "Behold the human. He claims to bear the weight of singularities. Let his bones sing our anthem. Crush, crack, conquer." The crowd howled. Krasner sneered, hefting the starship engine onto his shoulders with a casual flex of his corded neck. The metal groaned, its mangled struts bowing under genuine mass. Mercer's mouth went dry. "That's no prop." He approached his platform, the hologram emitter cold in his grip. The sand shifted beneath him, each step a reminder of Vega Nix's crumbling station, the way the floor had shuddered as Theron claws tore through bulkheads. He could still hear Corporal Liz's last transmission. "Cap, where are you?" The desperation in her voice, a blade he'd spent years trying to dull with iron and regret. The herald raised a claw. "Begin." Krasner sank into his first squat, the engine block dipping like a moon in orbit. His scales rippled, a wave of muscle and might. and the crowd chanted in guttural unison, Krasthar, Krasthar. The Emperor's nostrils flared, vapor puffing into the frigid air with each exhale. Mercer knelt, the hologram emitter settling across his shoulders. He triggered the illusion. The black hole bloomed, light bent, the air warped. Above him, a perfect void yawned, its accretion disk a shimmering noose of stolen starlight. The crowd's chant stuttered, a ripple of awe and unease. Krasthar's head snapped toward him, his pupils thinning to venomous slits. Now Mercer thought, the grind begins. He descended into the squat, the emitter's shell light in his hands, but the subsonic pulse drilling into his joints, a visceral reminder of the lie he carried. The hologram's pressure was imaginary, but his body didn't know that. Pain lanced up his spine, old injuries howling like revenants. His quivers burned, his knees threatened mutiny, but he rose, slow, deliberate, the black hole's shadow swallowing the arena's light. The crowd fell silent. Krasthar faltered mid-rep, the starship engine jerking in his grip. Mercer saw it, the flicker in the Emperor's gaze, the twitch of his tail. Doubt, the subsonic thrum was working, gnawing at the Lizard King's instincts, whispering that this human, this insect, was bending space-time itself. Mercer sank again, his breath ragged. The arena dissolved. Vega Nix's gym, smoke, the stench of ionized metal. Mercer under the bar, 500 kilos, veins like cables. Liz's voice, there in the vents, his own snarling, hold, I'm re-racking. The clang of weights, the scream of tearing steel. Too late, always too late. He surged upward with a roar, the hologram's event horizon rippling. Sweat stung his eyes, salt and shame. Across the arena, Krasthar bellowed, hoisting the engine again, but his form wavered, tail off rhythm, claws slipping. The crowd's chants fractured, some now murmuring, their faith in the spectacle cracking like overburdened ice. Mercer hit his 10th rep. The hologram flickered. No, not yet. He stole a glance at the imperial dais. Krasthar's broodlings leaned forward, their claws gripping the balcony's edge. But lower in the stands, a young Theron with chipped scales stood silent, his eyes locked on Mercer's struggle. You see it, Mercer thought. The grind, the grit, the fucking point. Krasthar finished his set, slamming the engine into the sand. Pathetic, he thundered, striding toward Mercer. Your strength is a mirage. The Emperor's shadow engulfed him. Mercer straightened, the hologram's void churning above. Funny, he rasped. I was gonna say the same about yours. Krasthar's claws shot out, seizing the hologram bar. The crowd gasped. The illusion held. The Emperor strained, his biceps quivering, tail thrashing. The hologram didn't budge, because there was nothing to budge. Mercer stood motionless, the emitter's pulse now a deafening drone. Krasthar's snarls turned shrill, desperate. The lower caste Theron in the stands began to rise, their growls a dissonant hum. You cheat. Krasthar spat. Mercer triggered the hologram's shutdown. The black hole winked out. The bar, a simple hollow shell, clattered to the sand. Silence. Then, laughter. It started with a chipped scale Theron, a low rumbling chuckle. Others joined, a cascade of disbelief and delight. Krasthar stared at the emitter, his chest heaving, the starship engine forgotten. Strength isn't the weight you carry, Mercer said, loud enough for the mic drones to catch. It's knowing when to share it. The arena erupted, not in cheers, but in chaos. Krasthar's broodlings hissed, leaping from the dais to shield their emperor, but the crowd's laughter spread like wildfire. Lower caste Theron shoved past guards, their claws slashing at propaganda banners. A chant rose, tentative but tectonic. Who man? Who man? Mercer turned, his legs jelly, his soul lighter than the emitter. He'd done it, not with iron, but with the oldest human trick, a story they couldn't ignore. The backlash was swift. Aboard the Resolute, Mercer watched the Theron Empire's broadcast. Krasthar flanked by his warlords, mandibles quivering with rage. The human's parlor trick, he spat, is an affront to the natural order. Henceforth,
All human fitness tech is forbidden, their media purged, their weakness quarantined. Mura leaned against the hollow screen, arms crossed. So, we're banned from selling protein powder to lizards. Win some, lose some. Mercer said nothing. The real victory flickered on a secondary feed, a smuggled vid of lower caste Theron in a dim-lit den, mimicking human push-ups. Their forms were clumsy, their growls uncertain, but they persisted. They'll come for you, Mura said softly. Krasner can't let this stand. He nodded. On the screen, the Emperor's decree continued, but Mercer's focus drifted to the edge of the frame. There, barely visible, stood Krasner's youngest son, a lithe, scarred heir with none of his father's bluster. The prince's claws flexed, as if itching to grip a barbell. Let them come, Mercer said. He limped to the gym, his body a tapestry of bruises. The Resolute's iron waited, indifferent and eternal. He loaded the bar, lighter now, just 300 kilos, and slid beneath it. The ghosts were silent, for the first time in years. So was he.
Chapter 4. The gym's air hung thick with the musk of effort, a mingling of human sweat and Theron musk that clung to the iron like a second skin. Captain Dex Mercer stood at the edge of the platform, watching a young Theron with chipped scales strain under a barbell loaded with earth steel. The lizard's claws trembled, his tail coiled tight around the rack for balance, but he sank into the squat with a guttural snarl, determination wearing the face of fury. Around him, human engineers and off-duty Theron grunts spotted each other in silence, their shared glances speaking in a language older than words. Mercer's hands tightened around a rusted kettlebell. This was the quiet rebellion, plates clanging in unison, the hiss of hydraulics, the scrape of claws on chalk. The Federation had condemned the gym as a provocation after the ban, but Mercer had kept the lights on, jury-rigging the power grid with Jax's smuggled parts. Let them call it a gym. It's a trench now, and we're all digging. He moved through the crowd, his gait stiff from healed fractures. The Theron nodded as he passed, not deference, but recognition. One, a hulking female with a scarred snout, gestured to her human spotter's grip on the bar. Claw. Here, she rumbled, adjusting his fingers. The man nodded, his fear dissolving into focus. Mercer lingered, the memory of Vega Nix's blood-soaked gym flickering beneath his eyelids. This is how we bury ghosts. Rep by rep. Night fell artificial and heavy over the asteroid. Mercer found Mara in the observation deck, her silhouette framed by the Theron border outpost's amber glow. She held a steaming mug, the scent of black cut with synthetic sweetener cutting through the sterile air. They're calling you a radical, she said, not turning. Says here you're corrupting imperial purity with human decadence. She tossed a data pad onto the console. Theron headlines blared in jagged glyphs. He leaned against the viewport, the cold seeping through his shirt. Decadence, that what we're calling grit now. Her reflection smirked. You've got a lizard doing Pilates in Bay 3. Core strength is universal. A beat. The stars beyond the glass blurred into streaks as the Resolute drifted. Mara's voice softened. You think this changes anything? Really? He studied her, the way her thumb absently traced the scar on her temple, the ghost of Vega Nix still haunting her knuckles. It's not about changing them, he said. It's about mirrors, letting them see what we are, what they could be. She turned, her eyes sharp but not unkind. You used to say that about the weights, that they were mirrors. Maybe I was right twice. The silence that followed was comfortable, frayed at the edges but warm. She sipped her coffee, her gaze drifting to the hollow screen where a grainy feed played. A lower caste Theron in a dim bunker, mimicking Mercer's deadlift form. They're watching, she murmured. Yeah, he said. They are. The gift arrived 3 cycles later, a crate, unmarked, delivered by a scarred Theron pilot who refused docking protocols. Mercer pried it open in the gym's storage bay, the scent of musk and ironwort pulp spilling out. Inside, Wrapped in scaled hide, lay a war club, jagged obsidian teeth fused to a femur, its grip worn smooth by generations of claws. A note, scrawled in broken standard, for the grindfather, Kraslar's youngest, the prince with the quiet eyes. Mercer hefted the club, its weight brutal, elegant, not a trophy, a totem. He carried it to the platform, where a cluster of Theron novices paused mid-squat. The female with the scarred snout sniffed, her pupils dilating. Bloodline weapon, she rasped. Honor or challenge? Both, Mercer said. He slid the club into the rack beside the barbells. Spot me. They trained until the lights dimmed, the Theron's growls harmonizing with the clang of iron. Afterward, Mercer sat alone on the platform, the club across his knees. His comms buzzed, an encrypted file from an unknown frequency. He opened it. A vid stream. Kravrik, lit by the pallid glow of a Theron forge, his claws wrapped around a dented barbell. The prince's form was raw, his snout crinkled in concentration, but he lifted with a discipline his father's court would have scorned. Behind him, shadows shifted, lower caste Theron, their scales dull but their eyes bright, mimicking his movements. Mercer saved the file. Mirrors, he thought. Everywhere. They came for him at dawn. Kraslar's assassins, elite brood guards with plasma-edged talons, breached the gym's airlock in a storm of static and spite. Mercer was mid-clean when the alarms blared, the bar crashing to the platform as he rolled behind the rack. The Theron lunged, their strikes calculated to maim, not kill. He wants me alive, Mercer realized. Wants to break the myth himself. He fought dirty, chalk to the eyes, plates hurled like discuses, the war club's teeth biting deep into scaled flesh. But there were too many. A talon grazed his ribs, searing through synth flesh. He stumbled, the club slipping from his grip. A roar shook the gym. The scarred female Theron charged, a loaded barbell swinging like a mace. Behind her, humans and lizards poured from the shadows, wielding cable rods and improvised shields. The brood guards faltered, their hierarchy-trained minds unprepared for this. A united front of mongrels and misfits. Mercer rose bloodied but grinning. Took you long enough. The female bared her fangs. Grindfather, talks too much. They drove the assassins back, a symphony of chaos and chalk. When the last broodguard fled, Mercer slumped against the rack, his breath ragged. The female crouched beside him, her claw gentle as she pressed a wad of gauze to his wound. Why? She growled. Why? Fight for us. He nodded to the war club, its teeth glinting with alien blood. Used to think strength was lifting alone. Now I know, it's lifting together. She hissed, a Theron laugh, and tossed him a protein bar. Human, food. Tastes like despair. You'll learn to love it, he said. The museum curator protested, when Mercer donated the tiny chair. It's a historical artifact, the man sputtered. Not a prop. Mercer ignored him, placing the chair atop a pedestal beside Kavrik's war club. The display's placard read, the seat that stood up. Crowds gathered, humans and Theron alike, their murmurs a blend of awe and amusement. Mara found him there, weeks later. They stood in the hall's quiet glow, the chair casting a long shadow. You're a shit diplomat, she said. But a decent sculptor, he chuckled. Had help. She touched the war club, her fingers tracing its teeth. You think it'll last? This, truce. Truce? He shook his head. It's not peace, it's respect. She turned, her face unguarded for once. And us? He reached for her hand, the scars on their palms aligning like constellations. We're still here, he said. Still grinding. The vid leaked on a dead channel, blurred and pixelated but undeniable. Mercer and Kavrik, side by side in the gym, squatting under matching bars. No holograms, no lies, just iron and effort. The Theron prince's growl harmonized with Mercer's grunt, a duet of defiance. It spread faster than any plague. By dawn, 1,000 Theron youths were replicating the lifts in basements and barracks. By dusk, Crossthar's warlords had issued another ban. Nobody listened. Mercer stood in the gym's center, the war club in one hand, a protein bar in the other. Around him, the iron sang, a chorus of clangs and snarls, human and Theron voices weaving into something new, something stubborn. He took a bite, the bar's chalky texture a familiar comfort. We bend, he thought. But we don't break. Somewhere in the dark, the grind went on.